Like this game between the adversity but also the resilience was just like a microcosm of this whole season. And did that in a way, like you're like, oh, we've been here before.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Steph said in the huddle. Like, we're built for this moment. When Kelsey went down, and then we're challenging the call on AB. We've been here before, so it's just so unlucky, so crazy that had to happen.
Completed the. Does the Indiana Fever really lose the fifth game? Or were they simply defrauded by officials who just wouldn't let them to triumph? Really give it some thought. Aaliyah. Lately, Boston fouls left what appeared to be similar to a spotlessly clean rebound. Kelsey. Mitchell is beaten and hacked all night, finally experiencing so severe cramps that she lands in the medical facility. Odyssey. Sims receives. Clipped on a drive, but inexplicably drops a ridiculous 27 points. However, the whistling, it was constantly slanting. Vegas's will. If you genuinely believed this game was fair, thus you most likely weren't paying enough attention. This wasn't merely a defeat. There was a fight through utter anarchy, catastrophic harm, as well as a series of officiating errors that resulted in the complete stealing a series. So, what did Lexie do? After this, I'll say, devastating loss. And this is obviously that theft and a stolen game. Believe me, that is the tale that no one is allowing to slide. Tell us in the comments below. What do you think of the referees below? Series. Alright, what if the largest? In reality, the Fever's opponent wasn't even themselves the two-time champions, but it was the referee crew instead, and their whistle. To be honest, the entire series is like that. Began to feel as a result of Game 1A, a trend that enthusiasts just couldn't ignore. Each and every time, it felt like Indiana made a significant effort, like the game's flow was abruptly cut off by a untrustworthy call that skewed possession, returning to Vegas immediately for the sole purpose of setting the Aaliyah. Boston was being tagged in tone regarding touch fouls committed by quarterbacks in the NFL would simply shrug its shoulders while Lexie Hull and Kelsey Mitchell got into a fight, bypassing defenders covering them the entire series. However, the whistle remained silent by the conclusion of the Fever's first 3 games. Their own play wasn't the source of their frustration. Nonetheless, with the way the game was titled, and pay attention, these weren't isolated incidents, errors. By the 3rd game, the disparity was glaringly obvious. The free throw, the numbers were strongly in favor of the Aces. This meant not simply easy points at the line, but a significant change in momentum, and momentum. It's quite difficult to maintain defensive momentum while you cannot be stopped without a foul being called. You mean it's recorded against you? Conversely, side Indiana was playing through what appeared to be close tackles at the rim without receiving the same whistle. A Fever. Stephanie White, the coach, even acknowledged that this discrepancy made it almost not possible to plan. How can you even developing a plan when a screen could be referred to as unlawful one trip, and then utterly disregarded the next? Additionally, naturally, fans took note. Media voices began uttering the same words, loud, with some accusing it of being blatantly biased, with others even proposing unique therapy for the ACS celebrities. And the more the numbers accumulated, the more up. There are so many free throws. The more convincing it is, the more missed calls looked. This was no longer random. This was an obvious pattern that immediately jeopardized the equilibrium of competition in each one game. By the end of Game 4, bundled up, nobody at all could assert that it was merely a coincidence. The Fever was fighting more than just Las Vegas. They were up against an unrelenting squad. It continued pushing them away. Additionally, it was frustrating to play the first 4 games. Believe me, the 5th game changed everything. Worse. Imagine battling for your whole season, being aware that each and every foul, it seems like the call has already been written against you. That was game, then. For the Indiana Fever, 5. This wasn't just about working out to stay alive while every bit of momentum continued to gain. Returned directly to the Las Vegas Aces. But in spite of all, in spite of the actual carrying of Kelsey Mitchell, sitting with Aaliyah Boston off the court, in serious foul trouble on the bench, Indiana was determined not to disappear. They pushed, they clawed, they almost accomplished the impossibility, even forcing overtime in the match, struck with among the most subdued moving screen calls you'll ever see. Go watch it, really. Back. She just touched the defender. However, the whistle still blew, nearly as if the referees were eager to slap her name on another infraction. Then only a few minutes, Megan Gustafson later made a dive that LeBron James would have been pleased. And, as expected, the referees gave her. Boston committed another offensive foul. Incredibly so. That in and of itself would have been furious enough, but the knockout strike arrived just in time. Jackie Young is up against Aaliyah Boston for a rebound with barely 26 seconds left on. When the clock struck her sixth and last foul, the game was over for her. The fever-stricken, in need of someone, anybody, to observe what the other people in the arena observed, that it was merely two players merely engaged in combat for place. The call stood, though. Jackie. Then Young took the initiative and sank the free tosses that finally provided Vegas with the lead, making Indiana finish prohibition in the absence of their all-star center. Imagine that. Here's another gut hit. Mitchell Kelsey didn't even have the opportunity to assist in those crucial last few minutes. She had been completely hammered throughout the night with extremely physical protection, arms thrown over her, hips examining her while driving, but not a single whistle. At last, her body failed. Halfway over the third chamber with intense cramping in the muscles. She had 15 already points and served as the focal point of their offense. However, the only answer she received. There were more bumps from the Vegas defenders, further hacks, and zero responsibility on the part of the referee. Other unpleasant experiences, meanwhile, simply continued, accumulating, such as when Jewel Lloyd pushed Lexie Hull so intensely that admirers were sincerely anticipating a blatant review. She got rad across the street, Natasha Howard. Ice. What did we receive? Quiet. Throughout the night, Odyssey Sims absorbed contact, even having a drive-in clipped over time, and ultimately became seen as the one who started the foul. People, the official figures tell. The story is as straightforward as day. 25 birds called on the Fever. However, in Vegas, essentially lived at the free throw line. This stuff cannot be made up. A.A. Wilson alone, after all, traveled 10 times to Boston, who was engaged in combat and the strike. Beneath the rim of each and every property, only succeeded in 2. You don't require some advanced stat sheet to view the utterly startling disparity there, correct? Nevertheless, in spite of all, Indiana was still not going to give up. Down. Players, their commander, and down calls. In the center, they fought until Odyssey Sims scored 27 points in a flash, bringing them back to a final tie of control. The match went to, not because the whistling gave them life out of the blue, but because they just wouldn't give the Aces a triumph. Folks, this was more than simply resiliency. It was outright disobedience. Additionally, that defiance, unique, isn't it just how they managed to survive? What a lot of people would refer to as corruption. It's the intense heat that each and every player brought about that amazing run. Keep quiet. You all retrieved. The game is 2 points. Occasionally the most motivational. In reality, triumphs aren't found on the
Scoreboard.
The hearts contain them, abandoned on the ground. Game 5 was, isn't it meant to be about survival? However, in reality, it turned into a strong demonstration of gamers who just rejected all of those poor calls. Describe them. Their amazing work, their indisputable resilience, and their rock-solid unity produced a narrative much larger and more significant than the on the scoreboard. One was only written. All right, let's discuss Odyssey Sims for a moment. The player in question wasn't, despite spending the majority of the year on the roster, signed a hardship contract beyond the deadline, and then, abruptly, she transformed into the series' unbeatable pulse.
And
She scored a staggering 27 in Game 5 points, skillfully moved the ball for 6 assists, and a remarkable 50% shooting percentage. Out of the field, she actually carried. When their offensive collapsed, Indiana, destroying defenders who were unable to stay in front of her and completing. Let's face it, officials get in touch with that. Never gave her anything in return. Her clutch layup. The game was tied late in regulation, putting everyone on overtime because of this. A sudden conviction that perhaps, just possibly, on this particular night, the whistle refused to decide everything. Sims wasn't merely performing well. She fully embodied the perseverance and bravery that provided the Fever lives during their most difficult time. Kelsey Mitchell's night comes next, which made everyone clear why. She is regarded as one of the most vibrant. All of the league's guards, prior to her, eventually passed out halfway through she was flat out in the third quarter. Invincible. 3 of 3 from beyond the arc, 15 points.
A.
Presence to which Vegas had no response at all.
4.
When she entered that semifinal, she was the unchallenged aggressive leader. Additionally, even as defenders beat her on all of her wounds, and she never once gave up on her drive. What a warrior. So much continuous communication
Was simply devastating.
However, even that, strangely enough, the detail fit this. The whole amazing tale. Mitchell provided all she possessed up until she was physically ejected from the
Game.
For Fever supporters, her injury is the only increased their sense of great pride in her steadfast struggle. It has carried the front court in ways that never happened in the box score. Really comes through, even in severely constrained minutes because of all those dubious foul calls, but she still rebounded, scored, and just maintained, requesting the ball be brought inside.
She survived.
Under continual strain grappling for position on almost all ownership, Boston nevertheless forced her to dominant and pervasive in paint, stabilizing the defense and scoring till she was controversially sent by those referees, dismissed after that vicious 6th foul in the final moments. To be honest, that moment swallowed everything and dominated, outworking everyone physically, and then losing the opportunity due to what many people thought was a ghost call. Imagine the annoyance later on. The game is over. Playing with a back injury that most athletes would experience. Honestly, even if she sat out with to record 7 rebounds, 12 points, and 3 helpers, she defended herself by utterly everywhere, soaring into dives after deflections, changing lanes, disconnecting drives. She was powerful. However, the kicker is here. It wasn't only about her stature. Following the match, Hull came up to serve as a steward, demonstrated why Indiana fans are prepared to support her at every turn. Season going forward, she wasn't merely playing with an injury. She was promising herself to the group and the game as a whole itself. What exactly did Lexie say about that then? Utterly devastating loss.
Shay.
Another unsung hero was Petty, who provided 13 points, 3 of which were critical shots, right from the bottom when the Fever needed someone to step up immediately. Following Mitchell's forced departure from the game, her capacity to extend the floor maintained. Alive, requiring the aces to defend truthfully and provide Sims with the vital room she required to really flourish. Those were important minutes, absent petties. Self-assurance to make those crucial shots. Vegas would have been completely destroyed. Under yet another whistle-driven
Run.
it was amazing to observe. Pay attention. This is not a conclusion.
No, this is the
Starting point. Caitlin Clark will be back next
season.
Boston's Aaliyah gets even stronger as a result of this encounter.
And
Cunningham, Hull, and Mitchell stand in for the courage and perseverance required to construct a real powerhouse. What followers of the Fever just saw wasn't only one stolen playoff run in the semifinals. That was the undeniable components of a dynasty in the process of occur. And for that reason, my friends, any rage about what the league appears to
taken away instantly changes into a
strong conviction in this team's abilities about to develop. What if, therefore, the most crucial aspect of the whole narrative is not how it concluded, but rather what it began? The Las Vegas Aces are in motion, on to commemorate another finals Indiana Fever appearance. They leave with something much more valuable, solid evidence that they have formally emerged as a serious danger in this
league.
A sixth seed that is completely non-existent. One anticipated in the final Game 5, even as you deal with the type of hardship that would have caused most groups. Take a moment to consider that. Really just consider what this. The roster was processed. The Fever had 6 injuries that end a season. They actually had to employ hardship contracts in order to maintain a complete spin on the ground. There, Caitlin Clark, the key player, missed almost the whole season due to injuries, just playing 13 games.
And
This group, however, did not fold.
not
Not at all. They defeat superior seeds. They prevailed. Games of elimination. They entered Las Vegas. Vegas versus an all-star team of aces. And resisted giving up until the very end. That isn't the resume, people, of a group that is still discovering itself. That's the indisputable record of a group that simply put the league as a whole on notice. Believe me when I say that Indiana's core. To be honest, it's frightening. Caitlin Clark will return healthy for the upcoming season.
and
Her unmatched capacity for stretching defenses, track down shooters, and get points from anywhere at all changes the offensive strategy of the Fever. Aaliyah, Boston has already demonstrated her ability to deliver double-doubles on a regular basis, even though she's coping with persistent double teams and foul trouble.
Kelsey Mitchell has demonstrated that she can score a lot of points against
Superior defenses, and in good health, she will immediately return to that important function. The appearance of defensive Lexie Hull, anchor and an essential leader in the locker room, makes her equally important as any of her box score figures. Additionally, when soldiers like Sophie are included, Cunningham leaving his position to offer resilience and dependable shooting, you start to know all of a sudden that this is no longer only a youthful, entertaining team. This is unquestionably the start of a real powerhouse. Caitlin Clark is anticipated to be completely recovered before into the upcoming season. And, to put it plainly, this Fever group acquired competitive skills. Without her at the greatest level, consider, regarding that is incredibly valuable experience. Imagine her now, returning to a roster that's playoff tested previously, linked by pure surviving, and more ravenous than ever. Without a doubt, the playoffs provided Indiana some wounds, but more significantly, they provided them an unwavering faith. This run wasn't an anomaly.
oh no, this was a preview.
The window for the Fever's championship is no longer down the line.
It's
Presently beginning to swing wide open. And, to be honest, that's the true plot The league as a whole ought to be anxious. Roughly, the Fever were unquestionably denied a last berth. However, what they constructed was far larger than a single series. They shown amazing heart, resilience, and the indisputable capacity to oppose a dynasty even though lacking in personnel. That's the sixth identity. It's on us now.
Continue to speak.
Don't allow this to be questioned. The officiating fades to quiet. Distribute what took place.
Continue to support this squad.
Since their battle merits your assistance. As the crowd get louder, this run gets stronger. They're growing more powerful and ravenous. Please share in the comment section below what you consider the referees in this series. For example, turn on all notifications and subscribe so you don't miss anything. Additionally, make sure to, at this moment, click the video on the screen, and the next one will see you. Turbo CRIB, I did the transcription.